pura tātou katoa. Ko hau, takarihi te marama, I'm takarihi te marama. I'm going to be doing our karakia tonight. Anō reira, ki karakia tātou. E ihua tēnei rā mātou, e noa tuna whakawhetai tunu ki haka. Ke tautunu mai o mana ki ata whai, ki runga i a mātou tēnei pō. Ke tau ai ngā whakaaro, I roto I tēnei wānangatanga, tēnei whiriwhiritanga, ke putai ngā kōro e tikānu. Māu anō hei whakamārama he huarahi, mō ngā iwi e rue e noho nei. Kia whiwhi tonu ei mātou, ki te tika te pono, te aroha, I roto anō I tēnei kaupapa. E wahania nei, e mātou, ke tatamei anō ki o mātou tūpuna ki a mātou, ki te arahi a mātou. Ke tika anō, tā mātou kawe I ngā kōrero. Karongi au ki mātou I ngā kino katoa. I roto nui te ingo tamatu te tama me te wairua tapu. Ake, āmi.
First off, I'm going to hand you over to Stu Edmeades, who's worked on this project for a lot longer than I have. So he's going to open with a history of the project and the tie-in that it has to the concept plan. Then I'm going to go through and explain the design process and how we came to this stage. I'm going to hand back to Mātua Takarihi to talk about the theme and speak to Masariki and what that represents for Raukawa. And then we'll go back to kind of the presentation, but I'll go through and walk you through the different elements that are in this concept plan that we're presenting tonight. And then we'll open up the floor for comments and feedback, and we'll collect information, and then we'll wrap up. So it should be pretty quick, depending on how much you guys want to talk. So let's just see how that goes. Are there any questions before we start? All right then, I'm going to hand straight over to Stu. Stu, tell us about this project.
Okay, thanks very much. And warm welcome, Flora. I might take a hiding because at school I remember young Maori boys getting a hiding because they spoke Maori. Now I'm getting a hiding because I can't speak it. Anyway, going back in the history, this follows on from the Tiwaiha Walkway, of which we were very involved with as a community and as our family was. And then so the idea came of bringing the Tiwaiha to Putaruru. Now, so that's why the design of the spring coming up was all part of that. Now, 10 years on, it's time to refresh that whole thing. With the advent of the Clean Streams thing and all the water accords that we councils and farmers and the community are faced with now, it's even more important that we celebrate not only the Tiwaiha, the Uraka, the Waikato, all the streams around, so celebrating the reason for water and the importance to us. But going back to the original design, if you notice, we've been there, huge number of bricks. We sold bricks to the community. So there was, I think the gold was the 150, silver, bronze, yeah. So there's a huge number of the older families that have got bricks in there. We did think of pulling them up and selling them back to the families for a nominal fee, but we want to keep them there because it's part of our history. So this is important, but not only that, it's not only the water that we need to celebrate is who is Putaruru? What is Putaruru? Putaruru is a huge amount of history in the timber, farming, and all that. All of those things are necessary for to have water because that's the giver of life. So it was a huge community project, and we had a wonderful time doing it. But now, now what's happened is that the original design, as ratepayers, the cost of running it, and Phil would run that through it, the cost of running that thing constantly 24 hours a day is not economic anymore. So we want to revisit that, redesign it, use half the water because water is precious to us. So that's the important thing, and I mean, I don't know whether you can remember, but the kids used to light and putting huge amounts of detergent in there. One day it was floating right across the road.
Do they still do that?
Yeah, no. Don't give these people an idea. Fantastic to see you all here. This is going to be your project because we're thinking out 20 years. So please have an input. We're just So anything else that we can sort of put in there? I think that sort of covers the history of it. But I think it's exciting, and but what we need to demonstrate for our district is Putaruru is a very unique place, and we want to demonstrate that by having this. And you've got to remember that looking out, with looking at projects with value-added food stuff and all that sort of thing, so that's all going to be part of that. We hope to have right along the street here, street markets down at a given time. So that's the vision of what we want. So please be part of it, be excited about it, because we are. So I'll hand it back to you, Walter.
Thanks. So yeah, like I said, I became involved in the project at the start of last year, and at that point, it had been PiP and PMF really had progressed with the concept design using an organisation called Urbanism Plus, but really that's a guy called Cobus Mentz, who's a really amazing urban designer actually, and who has brilliant ideas and probably you may have met him during that process, but he's really good at taking in what people are talking about and digesting it and turning it back out as something that's very real and achievable. So he'd put together a framework about the time that I joined, which I think was in February of last year. But that framework was very conceptual. It was very high level, and it was and Cobus himself actually felt that it probably wasn't the right document to spring on the community, because people would get caught up with some elements in there, like had a little tower with like a little half moon and other things, and it wasn't what he was trying to illustrate wasn't specific things, it was ideas.
Can I interrupt a second? Can you refocus the screen? Am I right? Or is it my eyes?
I think it's your eyes. Like I think that's as sharp as it gets, unfortunately.
Which part?
I thought it was me.
No.
No, which part don't you understand?
The writing is all blue.
But it's
Right?
I think it's pretty. I think it's quite sharp, but it might be just lighting up here. And also. So council's purpose with this project was to refurbish the water park. It wasn't to create something brand new and rip everything to shreds. It was literally tidy it up, take out the water feature, which was costing too much money, and there's been a lot of damage over the years. I mean, your Putaruru residents, you know what's happened here. There are trees that birds used to roost in and poo all over the place, and they've been taken up. And things have changed quite a bit over time, and now it's just not really cohesive, but also there are a lot of broken, damaged pavers in there. The water feature, as well as not being particularly safe and a bit dirty at the moment, has tiles and bricks and things missing from it. Like it really needs an update. And that's what council's project was about. So the council allocated $400,000 to it. I know that sounds like a lot of money, but that doesn't actually go very far in today's world. Anyone who has had like a concrete driveway or something done recently will know how much it costs even just to pour concrete. PiP and PMF had worked on the concept plan for Putaruru, and they saw the water park as the centrepiece of what was called Precinct 1 in the Putaruru concept plan, which is kind of like another centre of town, but around which food and artisan businesses were focused. So they wanted it to be much more than just a refurbishment. They made a proposal to council. The council said, yeah, that sounds like a great idea, but we're not going to give you any more money. And so that's the position that when I came onto the project that we were actually in, is we were trying to reach out and scope and like reach for the stars with the concept, but actually we didn't have very much money to do that.
I think the other thing we need to add there is if you go back to this part here, that's over the moon and cheese obviously. There are a number of international people that stop there. We want to go off that success. So the idea of the old Honda building will be artisan food, and then coming down to maybe a street market down there. So it ties the whole thing together.
Yeah, the design framework that was here when I came on board wasn't just focusing on the water park, it was focusing on what this area could be used in. And so you can't really see this very well, but on that side over there, those are little market stalls. And in here, this is where the market stall's gone, and it's got little fountains, like a little water picture. But it was basically trying to make the park work harder, trying to have more of a purpose than just a space that a lot of travellers had never seen. In fact, I'd never actually seen the water park before I worked on this project. But then I have not lived back in the district for a long time. I've been gone. So that's what was here. That's the document that was here when I first started. And the whole point of this really was to encourage people to stop, to
make it a destination.
Make it a destination, but the framework featured a tower. And the tower it wasn't meant to be a tower, it was just meant to be something that people could see from the highway. And it was it was kind of just to make people register an interest in it. And just think, if you're coming down from Auckland, you're going to Taupo, and you drive past and you see something, you're like, oh, that's interesting. On the way back, we'll stop. And that's the type of traffic that we're actually trying to pull in by having a feature here. So that's why there was this little tower concept in here. I will just move on. So we have partnered with a design company called Grey Matter. And that's because council doesn't actually have designers and architects and engineers. Well, we have some engineers, but it's not something that we do in-house anymore. We partner with other firms that have better resources, more skills than we could ever hope to recruit. So we partnered with a company called Grey Matter. And so they're a civil engineering and urban design company. And we chose them in a competitive exercise, basically, where we put two different companies, although one was an individual, together and said, tell us what you can do for us. And based on Grey Matter's presentation, we chose them. They had a really difficult brief because the concept that we had before, it looked very large. And when I put it to a couple of colleagues at Hamilton City Council, they said, that's great, I hope you've got $2.5 million. Because basically, if we went shot for the stars with that concept that you saw there before, that's how much money we'd need, which is more than 6 times what we actually have. So their brief was to develop something, a concept based on that design framework that we could actually achieve within the council's budget of $400,000. Or, if anything couldn't be afforded, to split it out so that we could conquer it separately. So that's actually quite a difficult brief, to take something that's really conceptual and then turn it into, and they go through a process called, I've forgotten what it's called.
Consultation.
No, it's quantity survey.
Yeah.
So they actually calculate how many bricks you need, like how much concrete is going to go in there, how much fill gets in there, plants and everything. So numbers, they do the numbers game. So they've actually designed something that they've costed. So it's something that we can. So their costs should be pretty accurate. They should be achievable. They delivered in April of this year, which was a little bit late, but we'd just been through COVID. And what they delivered was a site plan. Elements attached to that site plan, like refurbishing the gardens, changing things around, digging out the water channel, replacing the pavers, all the worky stuff, and they had costs associated with those. And then they split out the anchor feature part, which used to be a tower, so that was added in as a separate thing. The issues that they encountered, though, is that even though we tied the park to the Waiho, and we had a theme that was generally water, overall it really lacked a theme apart from that, and so there weren't any stories to tell about that. And that's actually becoming a very, very big part of anything that's happening around the world, actually, is the ability to storytell and the ability to have authentic stories that actually make sense for places that things are. So there was a lack of a theme. Also, despite the fact that they tried very hard, there was absolutely no way that that all the elements could be contained within council's budget of $400,000. So those were some really big issues that they faced. And it was a very late meeting. I think we received the plan from Grey Matter, and we took it to the Raukawa Charitable Trust and said, is there anything that you could contribute here? And they really came through, actually. They really did. We had an idea delivered to us by Maria Te Kanawa from Raukawa, and it kind of blew our minds, actually. And it was a connection that we never ever thought existed. And the connection is to Matariki. I can't speak to this because I mean, Raukawa is not my iwi. I'm Te Arawa and Ngāti Whakaui. And our traditions are very different. So I can't talk about Matariki and how that could connect to our district and how it could connect to the water. So I'm going to invite Mātua Takarihi up. And I think you're going to do like a little cross thing and have a little kōrero between yourselves about Matariki and what the theme actually means.
Kia ora tātou katoa.
Microphone.
I'll speak through this, eh? Kia ora tātou katoa. Now, I was called in by Raukawa Trust Board, Maria Te Kanawa. Usually they have their historians, which is Nigel Te Hiko. He was unable to come this evening to speak on Matariki, so Maria contacted me and I've come to, because she's a good colleague, and I've come to speak on Matariki. But let me tell you, it was our kaumātua who gave the name Matariki. We have a kaumātua council within Raukawa, and they put the name for Matariki for the theme that you're speaking on. Now, when Maria put it to me, and I thought about it, she sent me the details. I felt it wasn't right for me to speak on Matariki, so I had to stretch out to my whānau and my iwi, because if I speak on Matariki, I could put the future generations wrong. So at least if I had my iwi, my tribe and my whānau, who's from all the maraes around here, Ngātira, Pikitu, Pakarata-maiti, and Manga Kāretu, that we can guide one another in trying to get what Matariki means. Now, we didn't do any research or swatting up, it's just going to come out how it comes. Now, the kaupapa, the actual topic is what's Matariki to Raukawa. Now, mai koe koti. Hei pupuri here. Pupuri tērā. I thought I'll start with this. Now, I thought I'll go to the cloak here. This is a korowai. Now, it's what's Matariki to Raukawa. So this cloak will guide us. Well, you know the cloak went upside down, eh? See? Now, at the bottom here, these this pattern here represents the Mamaku Ranges. The Mamaku Ranges, its proper name in our history is Hautere. Hautere means the drifting winds that come through that area. And in the turn of the century, the name Mamaku came into place, but Hautere is the name of the ranges there. That was the the dwelling places of our ancestors when they required food from the bush. And down here in the flat areas, in Mangakaretu, Cookson's Road, all Tito here, they were all swamp. They were swamp in the old days until the land was established and then the drains were put in to utilise the land. And Hautere is actually to us, was the food source of our ancestors, and also the springs of all our rivers that come from Hautere, from the Mamaku Ranges. Those catchments, the major catchments were Oraka, which comes right up out to Rotohokahoka, starts, there's a place out on the other side of Rotohokahoka, comes straight through, down into Ngātira, coming down Whakarata-Maiti, heading here, out to Tiro, joining up into the Waiho. The other major catchment was Waiho, again starting back in the bush, coming back down where we know it now. And that is the main catchment that takes all the rivers out into Hauraki. The other major catchment is Waimakariri, which also comes through. So if you picture the Hautere Ranges, all the ravines, from those ravines come those rivers. And on those rivers come all the little rivers that you see that attach to those major catchments flowing out into the Waiho. They were the food sources of our ancestors of long ago. The eels. I'm going to mention something. In the Waiho, there's one native species that we still maintain, that's called the kōkopu. Galaxus. I remember the name, it was a Galaxus. We're the only place here that has that native species, apart from down in the Wellington region. So, with Matariki, our kaumātua chose Matariki. There's the meaning to it, so we're going to fit in where their thought was at that time. Matariki has been gone from the Māori world for me, two generations. It's been gone two generations. They were the ones, actually my grandmother, they were the last ones to eat all that food. We eat tin food. They were the last people to eat off the land, the sea, and read the environment and all those things. But to explain Matariki, each area is different. Now, we spoke about it. I know my nephew here is going to speak on that. Which Matariki should we talk about? He'll carry that. But each area is different, and the fact is, when we look at Matariki, it's in the east. The east coast see Matariki different to the west coast. Matariki is the Māori New Year. Mata is the eyes. Riki are all the little eyes that you see in the sky. So when we look, we're looking at the east. So we see Matariki different here than the ones on the east coast. But Matariki is the New Year. It's the Māori New Year. It's got a great meaning, and there's 7 stars in that cluster, which will be explained. Now, I'm just going to take 2 of those stars, and it'll be elaborated shortly. 2 of those stars are Waiti. Wai means water in Māori. Now, if you look at all the riverways, Waimakariri, that means the cold water. Waiho, fresh water. Waioraka, it's water that was an ancestor. Raka was an ancestor. The waters belonging to Raka, an ancestor that came from Kāwhia. What else? Waipā, the actual proper name for that is Waipā Hurihuri. And I think that's the turbulence within that river, why it's called that. The other bit was taken out because it's too long. Here I thought it was named after Waipā, the Waipā River flowing into Ongawahi from Motorohanga, but it's not. Our Waipa, it was a longer name. Waipa Takahurihuni. It's all the turbulent waters along there. But I've never seen those turbulent waters. I've only seen the waterways. So, bringing Matariki, I think the idea of the ancestors, of the Kaumatua, was the water, as it was mentioned with the waterways. Waiti is the fresh water. That star represents the fresh water. If that star is prominent in the sky, the ancestors know what the food resource, that's the prominent food for that's going to be the staple diet for that year. If it was Waiata, that's salt water, that's all the creatures in the sea, fish, shellfish, which is all these, all the life. You see, the tuna, that's all the tuna. Now the hautere, with all the waterways, in actual fact, when I made it, I turned it huri. It was that way. That's the mountains. All these represent the each river that comes from Hautere, these green bits. But it was that way. To us, Hautere is upside down because it's flat. To our old people, our kaumātua horiti, Hautere, the Mamaku Ranges, is flat. It's when you go into the Mamaku Ranges, you're in ravines, and you're looking like this at all these rock cliff faces. There's a lot of ravines in there. So to us, it's flat. That area was actually used in war times of war. We took our enemies up there, let them drop in the holes. There's big holes down there. They cover it with ponga. They let them drop in there. So not only was Hautere our food resource, but it was also our protector and all that. Now going back to Matariki, for me, I know it was a higher point. There's a high point out there, and we all know that village, Te Whetu. That's the area for stargazing. There's certain areas in the area that were used for stargazing. How the old people gauged the stars was the cliffs. And when that star hits that certain point, they know up when to move. That's how they read it in those times. But I'm going to pass it over to my other whānau, so we can all speak, and at least I know I haven't gone wrong. And they'll correct me if I'm wrong. But this is what this is, Hautere at the bottom, and all the living life on the mountain. Ngā huruhuru o Hautere. So I thought I'd bring these so we can get kōrero from these. These were the nets. All the weaving was done down here on the lowlands. Then they go up and, actually, the vines were from the bush, upper bush. They come down on the lowlands, do the weaving, then they start the fishing. In those days, they didn't just live in one place, they moved. They moved so the resources could replenish itself. So that's my kōrero for Matariki, and I'm going to pass it over.
Good evening, people, and it's lovely to have you here tonight, and thank you again to Matua Takarihi for giving us a brief kōrero around the whakaaro or the thought of Matariki. I think it's important for us tonight to share with you the background behind Matariki. And Matariki has had a resurgence in the last 10 or so years. As Matua Takarihi said, Matariki, I guess, has been lost to the world, and we are fortunate to have people such as Dr. Rangi Mātāmua, who have been crusaders, I guess, in the resurgence of something that has been long lost, and that is Matariki. In the ancient stories handed down to us from our Māori ancestors, Matariki, the actual story of Matariki goes back to one of the Māori gods, who was Tāwhiri Mātia, the god of the wind. And it was Tāwhiri Mātia, the god of the wind, who became disgruntled and agitated and angry and a little bit peed off because his parents were separated. And Tāwhiri Mātia's parents were in fact Ranginui, the sky father, and Papatuanuku, the earth mother. And in the Māori creation of time, originally Rangi and Papa were together as one, and the children actually lived between them on their hands and knees. And so a discussion took place to separate their parents. And the reason for the separation of the parents was that the children wanted to see light. They wanted to be a part of the world. And so, after great discussion, it was decided that one of the brothers, Tāne Mahuta, who is the Māori god of the forest, he was given the task of separating their parents. And so, Tāne Mahuta carries out the task, the duty of separating his parents. And at the separation of their parents, Māori refer to that specific moment as Te Ao Marama. And it is the moment where sunlight was brought into the world. And although for many of those Māori gods, it was seen as a great time of joy to be able to walk, because they had in fact lived their life on their hands and knees in the dark. And for many of them it was a joyous occasion to have their parents separated, in fact because they were able to walk and they were able to see. However, there were some Māori gods, some of Rangi and Papa's children, who disagreed with the separation of their parents, and Tāwhiri Mātia, the god of the wind, was one of those children who disagreed. And so because he was agitated and angry and disgruntled at the separation of his parents, Rangi and Papa, Matariki pulled out his eyes and he threw his eyes into the night sky. And that gave us Matariki. Mata is face, and Riki is small and tiny little pinholes that you see in the middle of the night. And I call them pinholes because in a dark room, if you see pinholes, you will see little shiny beams of light come through. And that, to Māori, is Matariki. Matariki, created by Tāwhiri Mātia because of his anger and hurt at his parents, Rangi and Papa, being separated, pulled out his two eyes, and he cast his two eyes, he threw his two eyes into the night sky, and created Matariki. Matariki today, because of the big resurgence, and because of Dr. Rangi Mātāmua being a crusader for Matariki, there is in fact 9 stars represented in the current constellation known as Matariki or Pleiades. But for us here as a local iwi of Raukawa, and for our waka or our greater iwi that we are a part of, which is Tainui, Tainui have always sat with the whakaaro that there were, have always sat with the notion that there were only ever 7 that were seen at one point. And there is evidence and proof for Tainui to suggest that there were only 7. And in fact, it was in the 18th century that two prominent Māori leaders, Tiwai Parame, who was from Hauraki, and Te Ao Katoa, who was from here in Raukawa, who were asked by the second Māori king, King Tāwhiao, to establish the coat of arms. And the coat of arms that they established included the 7 children known as Matariki. And that's information, those are facts and evidence that support Tainui's notion about there only being 7. And so tonight, yes, there are 9, according to Dr. Rangi Mātāmua, but for those of you who know Dr. Rangi Mātāmua, he also encourages you to follow whatever it is your local iwi or local Māori have always had within themselves. And so for us tonight, we want to acknowledge in general Tainui Waka and Tainui Iwi, because Raukawa is in fact one of the confederates that make up Tainui Waka. And they support the whakaaro, the thought around Matariki, and the notion of there being 7. And so they are. Waiti. Waiti is the star that represents the freshwater rivers and lakes and streams and tributaries. Waita is the representation, the star that represents the waitōtātanga, or the salt element of the sea. We have Tupuanuku. Tupuanuku is the star that represents all food sources and those things that are created from the earth. We have Tupuarangi are those food sources and those beings created closer towards the sky. And when I say closer towards the sky, I am talking about birds, bees, berries, fruits, those things that are not on the ground, that are more closely related to the sky. We have Waipunarangi. Waipunarangi is the star. I guess basically Waipunarangi is that star that reflects the weather and the weather patterns. Waipunarangi, if I was to translate loosely into English for you tonight, is basically the star that has a pool of water within it. And so when we talk about pools of water, we are talking about the water table. We are talking about the water cycle. We could be talking about our rivers, our lakes, our streams. We could be talking about transpiration. We could be talking about many things. And that is what Waipunarangi is. Waipunarangi is that star that acknowledges our weather patterns, the cold, the hot, the not so hot, the freezing, the wet, the damp, and the mold. Yeah? Waipunarangi, Tupuanuku, Tupuarangi, Waiti, Waita, and Ururangi. To Tainui, Ururangi was in fact the pōtiki, or the baby of the family of the stars known as Matariki. With our story around Dr. Rangi Mātāmua, who has now shared the greater story of the 9 sisters, including Pohutukawa and Hiwai Te Rangi, and in fact that Hiwai Te Rangi is the baby of the 9 stars of Matariki. I think it's also important for you to know that for us as Māori, we are not the only culture in the world that supports or that understands or has a connection to Matariki. In actual fact, if you go home and you research online, you will find that there are other indigenous cultures in the world that celebrate Matariki. And one that comes to the top of my head is the Japanese. And the Japanese also use that symbol on their car, which is the Subaru. And the Subaru also has the representation of the 7 stars, which is actually Matariki. And so Japan is one of those countries in the world that actually also refer to Matariki. However, Matariki with a different name. We should also note that our friends, our families in the Pacific Islands, right back to Hawaii, also support and also have stories relating to Matariki. So I guess I'm saying here that Matariki is not just something that belongs to us as Māori specifically, but more so to many other cultures and races around the world. We are just one of many indigenous races around the world that actually have Matariki in us. I think it's important, really, really important for you all to know that Matariki, we should see Matariki as being inclusive. We should see Matariki as being inclusive, not just for us as Māori, but for us as a community, for us as a people, and for us all as a community moving forward. And I do personally believe that there is, in Matariki, some aspect or some element in there that relates to each and every one of us. And when I say that, I'm talking about agriculture. I'm talking about milling. I'm talking about silviculture. I'm talking about dairy. I'm talking about farming. Today they call that farming, today they call that agriculture, silviculture, horticulture. Yeah? For us, if I was to translate those things into my native tongue of Māori, I could refer to Matariki and to those specific stars. And I could tell you now that those stars have a connection to the duty, the job, the business, or whatever it is you do in your community. And what does that tell you? That tells you that matariki is inclusive, regardless of who you are, regardless of your title, your job, the colour of your skin, or where you come from prior to being here in Putaruru or in the greater South Waikato. That matariki has a special connection to you and to all of us. I hope I've sold this vehicle right tonight. I'm actually a car salesperson. I'm not a salesperson about stars, unfortunately. So if it sounds like I've sold you fellas a 1978 Ford Vauxhall, well, it's the car you're going home with tonight, folks. But believe you me, it's going to be a cheap ass car. I don't know how cheap this particular project matariki is going to be. It's probably not going to be as cheap as a 1978 Ford Vauxhall. But that's, I guess, in a nutshell, is matariki. And before I sit down, because I am going to sit down, so those will be here all night, before I sit down, I ask you, I am urging you and I am encouraging you that if you want to know more, please come and see us, and we will be more than happy to sit with you and help you, and to give you a better understanding and just a little bit more knowledge around matariki, around the Seven Sisters. And again, if I didn't mention it, matariki, this particular constellation is known as Pleiades. And so, before I sit down, what happened is one of my uncles, he was Timothy, he went along, and a few years ago, he brought out traditional Māori calendar days and months. And so what he did is he brought them out and he placed them on the Gregorian calendar. And so what happened is that in the old Māori tradition, we only had 10 months in a year. And so when the Gregorian calendar came here, we ended up with an extra 2 months. That means we had to work an extra 2 months. Yeah? And so if we literally went back to the old Māori calendar, you'd have 2 months off a year. So you'd only be working 10 months. But what happened is, that all came out, and it was awesome. It came out, it was like a big firecracker, and then a man by the name of Dr. Rangi Mātāmua comes out after doing years and years of research, and he says, hey, this is all gone horribly wrong. And so, they started selling the story about 5 or 6 years ago that matariki always appeared in June. Yeah? So June is on the Gregorian calendar, but the actual month that Māori celebrate matariki is known as PiP. PiP is not actually June. PiP is actually around that time. And so matariki, the actual day that we call the Māori New Year, matariki, it changes every year. Unlike Christmas Day, which is the 25th, and Boxing Day, which is the 26th, and the Queen's birthday, which is June, and Labour Weekend, and other holidays like Guy Fawkes, matariki, the actual day for matariki changes every single year. That's because the constellation of stars, and you have to think about the weather patterns, you have to take into consideration the ozone layer and the greenhouse effects. So all those elements are put together, and so matariki shifts. And so matariki this year could have been on the 25th of June, next year it could be on the 12th, and the following year it could be in March, and the following year after that it could be May. So matariki actually shifts. It shifts according with the times. And for us, matariki was the Māori New Year, and the Māori New Year began in the winter. And why did it begin in the winter? Because the Māori calendar was designed and created around the winter solstice, not the summer solstice, the winter solstice. So everything Māori did started in the winter and went around and came back to the winter. That's why we're cold. So, again, thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to share with you some thoughts, I guess, some stories around matariki. I had another story in my head that I won't share with you because I thought, why matariki? Gee, my ancestor didn't talk about matariki. They talked about another planet altogether. But, that's we are here and it's looking like it's matariki. Okay? Otherwise, again, it's lovely to see you all, familiar faces also, like our whaia, Rutana, who we hardly ever see. And she's here tonight to be with you all, to be with us all. Okay?
Well, as you can hear, we have a theme. We didn't have a theme before, and we definitely now have a theme. And thank you for sharing your stories, because these are the types of stories that we want to be able to recount in the water park itself, not just on storyboards, but we're also looking at because we want people to know these things. I mean, I'm just amazed when you're talking before about judging what time, when the stars appeared on the edge of a cliff as to what was going to be happening in the year. I mean, that's incredible. Thank you. When that theme was recounted to me, it wasn't in anywhere near that much detail. It was just only really brief elements of it. And yeah, sorry, that's just quite wow to me. When we were originally told about this theme, we had a kind of design for the water park. It looked a little bit like this, and we got the theme, and then we amended it to include lots of different things. And basically, this is the point at which you have a look at what's in front of you, because what I'm going to show you on the next screen is basically what you've got there. And we're going to walk through the elements. So we have, and I kind of feel like we might have done it a little bit poorly now, tried to translate parts of that story into something that's workable into this theme. A lot of what you see in front of you will look similar to what's out there now, except actually all of this area in here and here and here, that's all been refreshed. We've taken out gardens, we've changed the banks. A lot of this is actually going to be artificial turf, and we're turning it into a more easy to maintain area that works, that has actually more spaces that people can sit in it. And I just feel like, so we've got elements like fixing bricks. All the edges of the gardens around here have these like raised brick nibs that are all smashed off and bits and pieces, so we're removing all of that. And so there's a lot of housekeeping, tidying stuff going on. That's actually where the bulk of the money is actually going into. But
So are you going to keep the T2P?
this one here,
Yeah, that's T2P.
yeah. Well,
That's Dave.
talk to Phil Parker, who's the manager of Parks and Reserves. Like he has a list of trees that he's like, that's not going anywhere.
That gives you oil. Good for the oil.
No, they definitely stay.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, there are a lot of what I'm going to call pedestrian elements in here, and that's what makes it the bulk of what we're doing in stage one, and I'll tell you about stage one and stage two later. But the elements that speak to the matariki theme are what you see running down here. So this gateway archway thing is something that we've adapted from what was in there before. And now that I hear the story, I think we could build this, but we could also be looking at something different. I mean, we're depicting 7 stars because we know that Raukawa count 7 stars in Matariki, which not 9. And we've just put a potama on here because a potama symbolises man reaching upwards to the heavens, but these are just general symbols. We never really expected those to be displayed on whatever this is going to be. So this feature here, which we're calling Rangi Nui because it represents the heavens and contains Matariki, is the element in here which was meant to be eye-catching from the road. Whether we could build this, but whether it turns into something else now based on the story, I'm not really sure. And I think probably we're going to be looking for feedback on that point in this engagement document. Here, this rock actually just stands in for generally something that's Papatūānuku, like Mother Earth. What that is, we didn't know at the time that we got this, and we actually thought that it could be sculpture, it could be something like coming out of the earth. We could have a sculpture symposium to make sculptures that would represent Papatūānuku in this area, or it could be like something that was sculpture and that you could play on, so a playable feature. The reason that for both of these things that we're going towards something that is artistic is that we can get funding for creative arts. If we build something like a tower or a playground, we can't get funding for that. The council would have to fund it. Because a lot of what we want to do here, council doesn't have the budget to do it. And so the way that we're thinking about funding it is actually going for grants. So those are two of the elements. So we've got Masariki here in the Ranginui working with and against Papatūānuku. And then here we've changed the watercourse to represent all the water in the district, so we're actually naming the awa. And it shows kids playing in lots of fountains. We never ever intended for that to be massive fountains like a water park or anything, but it's meant to represent water, maybe like bubble jets are running down in a channel. But if we did that in here, it wouldn't look like anything. So it looks like an actual water park. It's actually not meant to be that. We want to retain water in here, but the cost of putting water in is actually quite expensive. So I'm going to go through.
Has it been considered, like, I don't know if you've seen the park at Waikato Lakefront, and they've got like spinning things that move the water, so that it's not constant?
Yeah, that was considered as an element down here, but we wanted something that was water in the streams and rivers in the awa, and whether or not we can do this counts very much on money actually. If you go to your document, I'm going to walk through what stage one is on here. So stage one would be all of this refurbishment here, pulling out the current water feature and replacing it with this, which basically represents all the different streams and rivers, the awa in our district. It doesn't include either of these features, and it also doesn't include putting actual water in, because putting the pumps and the water treatment house and everything in there is more than we can actually afford in this first go. So in the first stage, we'd get everything in here, but not this, and the water running. It depends on what we actually do there. If we do something similar to what you see here with jets and things, probably we can't afford it. If we just repurpose the pumps that we've got in some way, and I'm not sure that this is actually possible, it's possible we could get water in this first stage. So that's stage one, and basically we have to achieve that next year. So that's a budget that was put in place in our last long-term plan, or the one that's running at the moment. We can't carry that over, we've got to spend the money. The stage two, which we don't have funding for, but we're going to seek funding, is this anchor feature. If it's this or something else, whatever it is, whatever represents Papatūānuku here, and if it doesn't come in stage one, putting water in the watercourse. Is that clear?
So even though those aren't actually what's going, was there an idea of what product was going to be used? Like what the anchor thing was going to be made of, and is it just concrete for the ground?
It's textured concrete, so I'll just go back a couple of slides. So I don't know if these slides are tiny.
With the feature, we looked at several options: stainless steel and ordinary steel would go rusty. And this latest one is the idea of doing it in wood because it does represent part of our heritage with timber.
Yeah, it's one
we haven't priced them all out yet.
It's one of the things that Okawa said. They said none of the materials that we'd used before actually came from the whenua. Like the stainless steel, it's like, what is that to this district? But if it's wood and stone, they're actually from the whenua. They're actually authentic. to here. Yeah, so what we'd be looking at for the water course, where the streams come down, is actually having a series of colours, and you can't see it from where you are, but like textured concrete with aggregate with different flecks of colour in them. So not just basic normal concrete there, and basically kind of reflecting the colours similar to the Waiho. So the streams on the eastern side have a really different quality to the streams on the western side. The Waikato tends to be really quite turbulent and rough and murky. The streams coming down from like the Mamakus and they just have a different quality.
So Walter, I had just a concern about that concrete that you're talking about. How sort of child friendly is that if kids fall on it? Stuff like that.
It's going to be concrete, but it's going to be textured crushed concrete, so it's not slippery. We did raise the possibility of it being something called new brick, which is kind of like a rubberized surface, but it's actually it's not very durable, and it doesn't last that long. Yeah, it's also really important to note that I know that there are kids playing in here at the moment, so it looks a little bit like a playground, but this is on the side of State Highway 1. We don't want to turn this into a playground. So we want there to be a water feature that you could go in, but actually we don't want to turn it into a water park.
But you realise by having a water feature there, it is going to be a playground because it is now.
It is currently now, actually. I know.
To tear it with water there.
I know kids go and get in the thing at the moment. It's one of the questions we want to ask actually. Is water necessary for the water park? Is it necessary to have running water in the water park, or can we get away with depicting it? Yeah.
I think the other thing too is that what we've done is that there are restrictions from council funding, but have we thought of going to, well, we know that Coca-Cola is quite supporting something which they did first last time, and have we gone to all the sources of funding through various organisations to get to where it's, the original one with the stainless steel one, we were going to flog the back end of a tanker, milk tanker, but get volunteers.
That's what you were going to do, Stu.
Oh, that was what I was going to do. But, have we gone to those people and said, look, what business do they do in Putaruru or the South Waikato? Fonterra is massive. We've got 3 dairy companies now. Have we been to all the water pump people and say, well, how come? Can we do this on a corporate basis? So, we're very keen to do. It won't be just the council funding it. In other words, you people come up with ideas and we'll go hunt them down.
Yeah, well, there is actually a question here, which is, should council consider funding the additional feature stage 2 as part of the long-term plan process? If council funds it, we actually can't get grants money. It's one of the first questions that they ask is, do you actually currently have funding? So if we do, that means as a ratepayer, we end up having to pay for it. So that's why we're going down the route of let's go grants first and then think about funding it if those were successful.
So there is a possibility of actually turning the water into an art feature as well.
Yes.
Around some of the parts of the world where you have water jets that make a pattern. I can think of sailboats and all sorts of other things. But I do want to comment on the major anchor piece of the importance of that. I mean, you just see the shadows of the actual building. That's a really important piece of architecture in New Zealand, and you're actually reflecting the pattern of that building, which is also important.
That's exactly why the gateway was originally designed in stainless steel in that shape, is because it splits to the other.
And it is also for selfies too. Have you been to Putaruru and have you got a photo?
But yeah, the shape is meant to be sympathetic to the shape of the post office, which is a. There are plenty of holes in the rock in the middle.
No boats allowed.
Yeah, oh, actually, and also, so I've got one more slide of Putaruru, and then I'm just going to open this up to the floor. So I was talking before about the possibilities that we could have. I mean, when we're talking, so we're thinking we could represent it with a sculpture of some type.
That's Mr. Simply here, by the way. Mr. Simply having the same.
That's me with a hangover. Or something playable, like, so this is a hupara, a traditional Māori playground. Harcourt Brown has been designing a couple around the country. So if we could incorporate that and make that, turn that into art, we could perhaps get grants funding from here. And these are pictures of Jocelyn at a stone carving symposium. It was one of the ideas that was mooted at a meeting that we had. Is like, why just pay one person to come up with something? We could invite some artists in and activate that space and actually have them working in the Waterpark area, like over summer, over a month or however long it takes to carve, and actually get something real and something working in the area, and then use that at the end of it to depict Putaruru. So that was quite an exciting idea. So that's, at the moment, it's just a rock, but it's not just to be a rock. Yeah, so actually, I'm just going to open up to comments from the floor. I think I've done my spiel. Is there anything that isn't clear to you that you want some more
Just go through stage
clarification?
1 for us.
Yeah, sure.
So we don't have to read everything. But just
No, that's fine. So, let's do this view. Can you see this view here? So stage 1 is lifting all the broken pavers, which are all over the place in here, and relaying pavers where you've got cracked ones at the moment, taking out the current channel that we have here and putting in a new flattened textured concrete channel. Moving the drinking fountain from the street into the actual water park itself, so bringing that in rather than just being out on the street. Landscaping the gardens around here, so changing all of this, turning these parts into like turfed banks that you'd consider. Funds, exactly. That's exactly that.
AstroTurfs, they don't demand.
So that'll be give protection and a visual screen from traffic coming up.
Correct.
State Highway 1.
Exactly.
Like
That's exactly what it's for. And also it'll look quite nice. Like, it's a point of difference. I don't think it's come out very well in here, but they're actually quite mounded.
Yeah.
It's refreshing the seating in here, so we're keeping the mosaics, but it's putting wooden seats on top of here. Putting a couple of play elements on this side, and we're not going for like little kid type play things because we don't really want to encourage really small children playing in here. More seating, and updating the signage and the storyboards here to tell stories from this amazing theme, as well as information going into an app so that people can actually get the theme electronically. Yeah, so that's what stage 1 is.
And some plantings, have you got any colourful plants going on the other side of the earth fund?
Well, I'll talk to Phil about this because, yeah, everything here is very subdued, like these current colours, which are very, very fashionable at the moment. But Phil Parker, who's the manager of Park, said, I think we want some brighter plants in there. So
I think what you're saying so far sounds really feasible for stage 1.
Yes.
And I think if you've got a splash of colour, already people are going to start buying into that. It'll create that excitement. So long as you've got the overall long-term view of definitely putting in that beautiful artwork, or the 2 sets of artwork.
I agree. And I mean, the problem I see is that getting funding for stage 2 isn't a short process. Like, so we've been told that we're very likely to get funding with this theme. It depends on how well we can sell it, but that the process for that is about 2 years.
Why would it be as long as that? Where's the holdup?
It's actually applying for grants, getting it, so there's a calendar for the grants timetable, and then once you apply for them, you go through a process, and then it takes ages to get the actual money, and then only then can you start with the design and the art and the engineering and the build of it, and so that whole process takes about 2 years.
The seating, wood seating around the little pool
Oh, you mean around the little mosaic? Yeah. Yeah.
We had wooden seating in the original plan. It's now steel.
Yeah.
Why? Because it got destroyed. Don't do it. Use the seating that's already there.
I think that was your comment actually, Stu, wasn't it? Just repaint. Oh no, that was Phil's. Just repaint what we've got.
But the wooden seating didn't work.
Correct.
So you go down the track wrong. My other comment is you're not touching anything on the timber side over where the fountain is now. Right on the left-hand side of the picture.
What, over here?
No,
down there.
Oh, down there.
I think that's right up the side.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you understand what that all means?
What, you mean the symbolism of it?
That timber wall.
There's a whole story there.
Do you understand what it means?
No.
No. Does anybody else know?
Can you explain?
It's made of totra, and it's the water flowing from the Mamaku down to the Waiha.
The whole story is there.
The story is there now.
So what's wrong?
No, but people don't understand what it's there and why it's there. That's my point.
So which part are you talking about? Right on the very left?
Under the shadow now.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
It's got a big old plough in there with the story.
And that table in there is totra and mattock.
Yep.
That came from the local forest.
So
Yes.
I think that's the whole idea of the matariki fee, from what I mean, I'm only putting my personal take on this, is that it's about bringing the whole area alive. So people can sit down and you can get storytellers in to tell them.
Yep.
And you can get
Absolutely.
you can get them, because nobody's ever said to the general public, we're going to have a storytelling session on one day. I'm going to tell you about that particular design on that left-hand corner. Now you've got the opportunity to do it because because the whole area has got a full story in its own right. And if you get the right storytellers, and then you get the children, the young people getting in and making their own plays around it, it brings the whole thing alive. So there's a celebration for matariki.
Oh, absolutely. I think it's a marrying together of the two cultures is just so
I
important.
think this is one of the most exciting concepts Aaron was finding in books. That we have come through everything from trying to be a camellia town to be a wood-turning town when I've seen the signs to the Waiho and here, Matariki. But sitting in here, as I read it, I'm more concerned about the way the stages go. Number 9 of the stages says we're going to investigate, tell the stories. But if the anchor isn't there, how do we tell the story of Matariki? And I think that anchor there is, whatever it takes place to show Matariki becomes important. And if I'm going to have an edifice like that, and I like it, let's make quite certain that the stars are like pinholes and glisten. It wouldn't take very much to either put LED behind them and put solar things there, so that at night as I'm going along and driving, I see Matariki shining in. So I'm not just seeing painted things there, I'm actually seeing the 7 sisters there. And as we were told tonight, that cluster that we know as Matariki, and for 10 years I went on the top of Colson's Hill with Rokawa to welcome in Matariki. And we had the father going one year come up because they had a bonfire up there and they didn't like, but okay. But, there is the history of Matariki, and we've got some wonderful stories of Matariki that we need to tell. So council can't investigate putting out things. If this group here says anything to council, make quite certain that there are stories. You don't just investigate, you bloody well do it, so people know the stories. And they can look up and down. And that means tourists coming through from other cultures, They know Matariki as other names, as we've been told, whether it be Japanese or the Middle East, because they were navigation stars. And therefore, let the other people then see, hey, here it is here. Then they will stop and recognise, because they have a bond to what we see as Matariki. If we have Matariki there, those stars must be visible at night, not just painted on. Good science will turn around and say, let those stars shine. And that anchor must be number 9 of stage 1, then tell the stories. We've got to get to council and say, hey, you will find the funding to make quite certain that that structure is done, and then you can tell the stories. What the hell are you going to tell stories about a thing that's going to be 2 years away? Not on your life.
Well,
I'd love you to come in there and talk to the current council.
yeah, but I mean, if we get together and say this is what we want, then I think it could be a change of opinion.
Creative New Zealand would help fund something. The Prime Minister's already just taken on to Matariki after we did it first. Just tell her.
I'll give her a call.
Good point.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions from the floor about like anything that you're not sure about?
What
Something I
about your
haven't
team
explained
up there,
properly?
you young people, what do you think of the idea?
Walter, what do you call that beautiful mantle, the cloak? Sorry, I'm a bit ignorant.
Oh, you mean this? So we've actually called it the Rangi Nui anchor feature. This, you mean this up here?
Yeah,
in these pictures.
No, to me it represents that beautiful cloak.
Oh, korowai.
That's, sorry, I don't know.
Yeah.
That's alien to my knowledge.
And the designs that we've put on here, we've actually just ripped them off of the internet. What would go on here would be something that would be authentic to Rokau. I mean, the story has to come from Rokau because this is the Rokau was all.
I love it though. It's
yeah.
really nice.
Can I just ask all the bricks been relayed? Because to me it looks like a weave pattern at the moment. I don't even know if that looks like that now, but are they all being relayed?
No, so we're focused on some areas where we've got broken pages, and we're only relaying those. Everything else, everything that can, will stay because it's actually really expensive to put in pages.
Your kids down there, got any ideas?
I actually think it's a bit of a shame when you say you're going to discourage the children from having fun in the park.
It wasn't our space.
It is a bit of a shame.
It's not.
I mean, the children of Putaruru haven't even got a decent skating rink. All it is a sugar bowl. And you don't want them to play in the park either.
Well, we don't want to turn it into a destination like playground because it's so close to the state highway. I mean, we actually just can't.
The Maori culture is all about whānau and mokopuna.
Yeah, I've got a comment on that. I want to know what actually is it supposed to be a symbol or is it supposed to be a playground? Because at the moment it looks like it's neither. And you need to decide what you want. And if you're supposed to attract the passing tourists, they probably want somewhere nice. I've got a couple of comments. Artificial turf, cheap and nasty. If you want people to stop and linger and then go to the shops, if you've got artificial turf, it'll be like a playground and you come and have a look in 5 minutes and go. The other one with your seating, if you want people to linger, it needs to be attractive. It needs to have a wind break and a sound break. So at the moment, if I was to sit there, 6 months it's windy, in spring and autumn, and I'd sit there and then I'd go because it'd be too cold, I wouldn't linger. And the steel seat, this is supposed to be a timber town, we're supposed to have things that come from the earth. Might be expensive to upkeep, but timber is probably, it needs to be attractive if you want to attract people. If you want a playground, make a playground. But if you want a feature that people are going to stop and be interested in, because there's some lovely concepts in there, make it a feature that actually attracts people.
Yeah, and I hear what you were saying before. It's like, is it a playground or not? And actually, kind of, we actually do want people to play in it, but we don't want it to be its sole purpose. and it's balancing that I think is difficult. I think we need feedback and ideas about how that could actually work. I don't want it to be something like this where kids come down and they like strip down to their toes. And it was one of the first things that Hokawa said to us when they saw it, and they said, "Are you going to have changing rooms?" And it's not meant to be that type of play, but we'd love travellers to stop and take their shoes off from driving in a car and walk in some flowing water. That's the type of thing that I'm envisaging, how we make that work. I think we need some suggestions.
The one in Hamilton there, I can have it, is it the museum? They've got, it's like the dog, it's the story of the dog, and it's made out of rako, and their water feature, it actually just drizzles down.
Yeah.
So it's not all along, but you've still got the water ideas. That's something that could maybe deter the whole plane, but there's still that interaction and engagement with the water without all that cost that we're thinking is holding us back if we do all that other stuff.
A lot of the costs that we currently have, and I'll explain it, is that, and you've seen it, the water channel gets really slimy. A lot of the cost is cleaning costs, and because it has pumps constantly running, so there's one pump running all of the time circulating the water, so it goes through the chlorine cycle, and then another pump which is quite really high volume powering that fountain. They wear out. So there are much better water features, more economical that we can design, and if we don't have water standing in a channel, it doesn't have the possibility of getting slimed up. It's easier to maintain. So we can have cheaper water, it's just we've got to be clever about how we do that.
One other point, have you run this past transit New Zealand? Especially with they're having the thoughts
Yes.
of
yes, we have.
Redesigning all that bloody main street that's a shambles.
Yeah, so Grey Matter, who we're working with, they're also doing the State Highway 1 project. So
you go and choose your area.
So yeah, so they've also checked. They've also checked quite a lot of stuff with Transit New Zealand to make sure that this isn't going to break the bank to build, and like I said, also with the historic building trust, the National Heritage. They're really happy with how it fits in with the post office at the moment. It was, because of where it is actually really cute.
No, it's more because you're trying to catch the traffic.
It's because it's in a prime location. We're trying to make use of that space. And the thing is, it's not even actually something like this that is going to catch people's eye. It's the fact that people are in here. That's what catches people's eye. That they see people in a space and they say, I wonder what's going on, and they actually want to be in that space. So we're trying to make use of where it is. That's why it's here. But also try and keep it safe as well.
How long do you envisage this park to last before it ends up like the current water park and it gets bulldozed and you put something else up?
Well, hopefully a lot longer, because we'll build it a lot smarter than what we built the last feature.
Technology has moved since that was done. But therefore the materials, as Phil was saying, he's looked very closely at low maintenance, but keep it smart.
I think standards have changed a lot too in the last 20 years. We wouldn't build a lot of the features that we built into the current park. Like we just know, like with around the gardens, they've got all these raised bricks and things that smashed within a few years. The water feature itself is not resilient. Like we actually build things to a higher standard these days. Ultimately, that comes at a cost though. Like that's why things are so expensive to build nowadays, because quality standards have raised, people are demanding more. And materials costs has also gone through the roof. I know that and this is something that when the 3D came back, I said I was expecting this to be higher. So all this around here is actually meant to be a natural barrier to people going over, so that we don't need fencing. It doesn't look as barrier-like as it's actually meant to be.
I still find that hard to believe, because if we're encouraging tourism or just families, whoever, to stop and look and listen to stories and stuff, it takes but a second to take your eye off your child or whoever you've got with you and they're gone. You know, and that's, I don't know if that's what you were implying before about that barrier and like some sort of, in my mind, I still feel like there needs to be some kind of fencing or something because it is a main highway, regardless if it was a playground or not.
The amount of cars that go over that roundabout and that pedestrian.
That
I've seen
pedestrian
a
is
car
terrible.
crashed in the middle of coming into town about a month ago, and it took, 3 months for the fence to get fixed on the pedestrian last time? Like, cars do crash there with nothing to look at.
And all the plantation that's by that pedestrian area is actually, you can't see. They can't actually see people and they just keep going. So even that part then, something needs to change about the design in there. Like, you've got to have beautiful gardens and stuff, but it's what we're choosing to put in there has to be better thought out.
Just when we first started on this, there was significant talk about a safety glass type feature right around the back of it, or a talking wall. A talking wall. Certainly, from our point of view, that's never gone, but we do need to get this part right so then we can look at, because that's going to be cost. But we're right with you, there's got to be a safety feature of some sort there in Park Eloise. What it will look like. If glass was a real...
Got a chance, write it all down. Let's have it.
We'll be writing it
Sorry,
down for 8
Jocelyn.
years.
Well, maybe we should get it, the speed drop to 30 k's. That would be pretty cool.
Transit would be very agree about that.
Just get a couple of judder bars.
There'd be a place to do it.
With our technology and all our phones and we're registering everywhere we go, couldn't we have our own sign that shows where the parking is, where the bits and pieces are that we're doing, like the public toilets as well as this, and all that kind of stuff? Why don't we have our own one of those? So as they come into town, they literally just hold it and grab all that information. So the app becomes where you park, where you eat.
There's, I mean, actually that kind of stuff exists now. So you can link up with Google's services basically to augment all the information that you have. We're also looking at an app, not just for here, but for the whole district, that has all the information that we want to put in. There's nothing that stops us interlinking that with Google.
Doing Putarruru's own.
Well, the district, sorry. It would be
We're
for
talking
the whole
about
district.
Putaruru here.
There is only one town.
There is. We're the centre of the universe now.
So, what do people think generally? Do you think this theme actually reflects Putaruru?
The place certainly needs a tidy up.
Yeah. It's actually, I think the Waterpark is the tightest it's been after COVID. They went through and did all the gardens and stuff. I remember everybody saying, "Wow, it looks great," but I was in there the other day thinking, "It looks tight."
Absolutely.
I think, Walter, what we have to do is we have to talk about the district, not just Putaruru. Because from a Māori perspective, we're talking about the whole area, which actually for Māori is the Pāteke area. But when we're talking about the water as well, we're talking about the area from the Waikato River over to the Waiho River in there. So it's not just about Putaruru, it's about all the people that come in and use Putaruru as its main shopping centre. But it's not just Putaruru, it's actually the whole area that it covers. And along State Highway 1 going to Taupō, with council and Rokawa, we put in at Hachipati, if you remember, the accidents that happened when people were killed hitting the Kohatu as well. And so we redesigned that whole area, and around the rock itself, we put a punga fence around it. You could put something similar to that as a boundary and incorporate it in the whole matariki concept, because you would let the punga grow as well. So, I mean, you can have them low depending on what, but as long as you've got some, because I agree, I think that there does need to be some a significant boundary to prevent little ones from going. we can only do our best. We're never going to be, you know, completely safe.
No, and actually, whatever we build around here, there will always need to be this opening out to the side to the road, because that's where people cross. Anything else?
And I guess this would boost the local economy.
I hope so.
The road, it's, the intention is across the road, where the old Honda building is, isn't it? That there'd be some retail or some cafes and stuff.
That's the idea, yeah.
Yeah, not just across the road, but also on this side of the highway, the cow. Yeah, and over the moon, whatever the old Honda building becomes. The old post office or the food court that's there. Yeah, it's all about turning it into a food precinct.
That Honda building, is that not part of this concept plan?
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
Well, actually, it's not. It's actually
That's what
out.
you just confused me.
Yeah, it's actually out. It's part of the precinct, but it's outside of the Waterpark. And so the boundary finishes just before the road, actually.
But it's part of the Putaruru concept plan, just not Waterpark.
So maybe just another idea, after hearing the story, possibly putting something that does audio there. So like, so you say the story's already there where that tōtara is, maybe having, I don't know, one of those barcodes things with an audio thing that you can scan and hear the story.
Well, and so I mean, that's with the app. There's a possibility of recording lots of stories, having people actually, having recorded. But there's something like another one of my projects is the talking pole forest in Putaruru, and I really want to get those talking poles to actually speak, like to actually a voice to actually come from some of them and tell an actual story, because they do tell a story, but I think unless there's a physical voice.
I think you could do that as well as storyboards. I think storyboards would be really good. And, just as an idea, maybe local businesses could actually sponsor a part of a storyboard and have them in the spaces around the park, talking about the different features and the symbolism of them.
But have you seen the graffiti that's on that whiteboard on the side there currently?
Well, hopefully if you get youth involved, then they'll have some ownership in it and protecting and looking after it. That's the whole point of those kids being here tonight, so that they feel part of the process, because they haven't been part of the process.
And shouldn't the cameras be seeing that as well?
The cameras?
Yeah, there's cameras. There's one on the LJ Hooker corner that should cover all of that.
Oh, yes. So
the one from BP should see some of that too.
Yeah, so there's also another project to increase here, like the coverage of CCTV and series as well as provide Wi-Fi. Yeah, so I mean, the main point of this exercise is to get written feedback. So because you can tell me lots of things, I'm going to take back a lot from this session. Especially going to take back a real appreciation of the story of Matariki. Thank you. But what we really want is feedback on this form.
Can you not use the recording that's been done?
Oh no, absolutely. So I'm gonna get this recording and I'm gonna play it back and I'm gonna create notes from this meeting, because there'd be so many. It's really hard when you're presenting to actually take some of the stuff in, and I've heard some really amazing stuff tonight.
But there'll be more than one table, right?
Yeah. So there's actually more down here, except we couldn't fit it into the picture.
It's weird looking, but because of the current feature. Because when you come out of the food court and you go to walk past, there's like a splashy bit. And there's like a great thing that smells there. Right where you've got that table.
Is it a fountain?
Oh no. There's there's like some weird drain there.
No, I think it's a grease trap from the...
Oh. Yeah, that's not a feature. Yeah, what if it's a grease trap?
So one of the issues that the person sitting behind me have raised was that, are we trying to be a feature or are we trying to be a playground? And I see it as being more of a feature and less of a playground, because there is a child's playground opposite the library. So from a safety point of view, if I'm wanting my child to enjoy swings and have a playground and a run around, I either go up to Denshi Park or that playground. So I'm interpreting this as more of a feature and more of a place of respect. That's how I'm seeing it.
Yeah, I think it can be. I think it can be a little bit of a mix of both. And I think it's a usable feature. It's a usable feature. I think that's what it is. It's not a playground. Actually, it's not a playground.
It's not a playground.
But it is a usable feature. How that works is something we have to design.
So it's almost like we're going to down-tone the whole water emphasis. There should still. I think that there does still need to be.
I think
some.
everybody agrees there should still be water in there.
Yeah.
Is that what I'm hearing? Yeah.
Got it.
But I just add a little bit, I want to think outside the square, but you imagine all this filled with tables and umbrellas and what have you, and kids from other schools coming past stop there to have a drink, but then they can hear the story of the Maori people of our district. Now, what better learning can you do with that? I just throw that at you, but I mean, and even these young kids, on a Friday afternoon, having a whole lot of tables and chairs out there, they get out their guitars and do some music. What's wrong with that? In other words, it's a place for people to meet. We might even get some people to do some singing.
Is there any planning for like sales or anything? Like over at Putaruru, they have the shade sales.
That can all be added to it. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, there aren't any current plans for it, but that could definitely be added. I mean, you put poles in there and you just string up sales and summit.
There you go.
I think that's what the misperception is we all refer to it as a water park, but we don't want to be calling it a park anymore. In the sense of we associate parks to children playing.
And that's also something that
rename it.
Something that we'll be looking at doing. We'll be looking at renaming it, but a lot of that will be based on the theme, based on what we get back as a theme for Matariki. I don't know what the name is, but I'm sure these things have a way of dropping out, and something becomes very obvious, and that's what it becomes.
You guys ever thought of putting a stage in there? A permanent stage in there?
Well, with the food court there is a bit of a stage there really now, actually. And you get a couple of the music. Yeah.
Well, can you indicate on there where the food court land actually ends?
Yeah, sure. Even though the current park is all paved, the food court actually, the council's land actually, I think it comes up around about here, and everything to that below it actually belongs to is land belonging to the old post office building, which is in private ownership at the moment. So a lot of this out here we can't actually change. I don't know how it was agreed with them in the first place that we were able to change that landscaping feature, but most of that will actually just stay how it is.
So is there the buy-in from the owner for the tables and stuff? Like you just painted a really awesome picture of having tables and stuff, and it's not even council land. Have we got the buy-in?
Well, so all of this is
absolutely. I think
it's
people
just
there
this bit, kind of what you see in the shadow.
So what she's saying is the owner of the building who owns that front part there, are they happy to have the table and chairs out on the concrete out there?
If I can answer that, yes they are, and they're coming to the meeting on Wednesday afternoon to just become more involved in what...
They don't live locally,
No, they don't live locally. No, they live in Auckland/Singapore.
Well, you wouldn't need to be too bright to know that actually that's an advantage for the listeners.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
you're right.
If they said no, they've actually destroyed the opportunity to encourage people into the building.
And I've seen photos of chairs and umbrellas out here before. Yeah. I don't know when the last time they did that, but I've definitely seen it full of people as well, like actual photos. I don't want to take up too much of everybody's time, like it's getting quite late. I think we'd all like to go. It would be great if you could either take this away, is probably the best thing to do is to take it away and think about what you're going
Pull
to
it
write.
up, right on.
Yeah,
All over.
because it's not just tick answers that we actually want some suggestions. We do listen to what you say.
Is that online? So
Yes, it is actually. If you want to fill it out online, there is an online form. So if you go to the address that's on here, you don't have to use a pen. You can just go in and it's like a survey. So if you want to do that way, you can do that on your phone as well. That's a much easier way to submit. But please do feedback. It's really, we do listen to what you say, and we really want feedback on this. We really want to understand what works and what you think should change and should be included.
Will there be a box at the library?
Yep, so you can also just fill this out and just drop it in at the service centre here, also at the dog and Tiro, and the Putaruru council offices and the library as well.
Sorry, so this is to be done by the 23rd, so what's the process from there?
So from the 23rd, we'll collate everything, and we'll publish the results of that feedback, and we'll move into the next section of design.
So what's the time frame? I'm just thinking, we're not waiting another year or two to
You can't. Apparently, if we don't use this budget in the next financial year, it's going. So, and the financial year ends in June of next year. So we have to get spades in and actually start building things pretty quickly. So the time frame for build is, so we're looking at starting this in summer. Anything else? Okay, Marta, if you could say closing karakia, please.
Kids didn't come back. Kids didn't come back.
I don't know if they are coming back.
They can come back on Wednesday.
Yeah, they can come back. Marama's actually out there taking a lot of their feedback, because they've come, I think, to talk about different things like the skate park and other things that are important to them. So they are being listened to. I don't think they're coming back here.
They were actually here for the water park, so they have had their korero.
Oh, with Marama?
Just in amongst their group with the whānau at the college.
Do you know if they're going to feed back?
Probably not, because they're shy.
Oh.
So Marama will get that.
Okay. Yeah, Marama will be able to talk to them.
Kia ora tātou, we'll do the closing. Kia tātou katoa.